Divers found a WWII submarine with 50 crew members still trapped inside. What they discovered next shocked everyone. In 2010, divers swimming near Italy made a discovery that would haunt them forever. Deep underwater, they found a German submarine from World War II. But this wasn't just any old wreck. The hatches were still sealed shut. 50 men were still inside. They had been trapped there for 66 years. This is the story of U-455, a German submarine that vanished in 1944. For almost 70 years, nobody knew what happened to it. Families waited for answers that never came. The German Navy marked it as missing and moved on. But the sea kept its secrets until one day, divers found the truth lying on the ocean floor. What they discovered tells a story of brave men, deadly missions, and a war that swallowed submarines whole. The wreck of U-455 still sits underwater today, bow pointing up as if the crew tried one last time to reach the surface. Inside that steel tomb, 50 sailors remain at their posts, frozen in time since their final moments in 1944. During World War II, German submarines were called the Grey Wolves. These underwater hunters terrorized Allied ships across the oceans. They would sneak up on cargo ships, fire torpedoes, and disappear before anyone could fight back. The Allies feared them more than almost any other weapon. But life inside a submarine was horrible. Picture being locked in a metal tube with 49 other men for weeks at a time. The submarine was only 220 feet long, about the size of 2 basketball courts. There was no privacy, no fresh air, and barely any room to move. Men shared beds in shifts because there wasn't enough space for everyone to sleep at once. The smell inside was awful. Oil, diesel fuel, unwashed bodies, and rotting food mixed together in the hot, humid air. Fresh water was saved for cooking and machines, so crew members went weeks without washing. They ate meals sitting next to torpedoes because every inch of space was used for something. The worst part was the fear. At any moment, enemy ships might find them. Then depth charges would explode around the submarine like underwater bombs, shaking the metal hull and making everyone wonder if the next blast would crack it open. Men would hold their breath and pray as the explosions got closer and closer. U-455 was built in 1941. It was a Type 7C submarine, one of Germany's most common designs. At first, the submarine patrolled near Norway, hunting for Allied ships in the cold northern waters. Those early missions found few targets, leaving the crew frustrated after weeks of dangerous, uncomfortable patrols. Later, U-455 was sent to the Atlantic Ocean. There it had more success, sinking British cargo ships. The crew felt proud when they scored victories against enemy shipping. They thought they were winning the war, one torpedo at a time. But by 1943, everything changed. The Allies got better at finding submarines. They had new radar, better sonar, and planes that could spot submarines from far away. Suddenly, the hunters became the hunted. Many German submarines never came home from their missions. The crews just vanished into the ocean, never to be seen again. This was the dangerous world that U-455 entered when it got orders for its final mission. The submarine had to sneak through the Strait of Gibraltar and enter the Mediterranean Sea. It was one of the most dangerous passages in the world. The Strait of Gibraltar was like swimming through a trap. Only 9 miles wide at its narrowest point, it was heavily guarded by Allied forces day and night. Patrol boats, aircraft, radar stations, and underwater mines made it almost impossible for submarines to pass through safely. For U-455, crossing the strait meant everything. Success would let them reach their target area in the Mediterranean. Failure meant death in a steel coffin at the bottom of the sea. Many submarines that tried to make this crossing were never seen again. In January 1944, U-455 prepared for the attempt. The crew sealed the hatches, checked all systems, and dove beneath the waves. Inside the submarine, lights dimmed and men spoke in whispers. Everyone knew their lives depended on absolute silence for the next 40 hours. The submarine crawled along, the ocean floor inch by inch. Above them, Allied destroyers patrolled back and forth, using sonar to search for any sign of enemy submarines. One wrong move, a dropped tool, a periscope raised at the wrong moment, could mean discovery and death. The air inside got thicker and harder to breathe as carbon dioxide built up. The temperature rose, making men sweat in the cramped space. Every breath tasted of diesel fumes. There was no room for mistakes and no time for fear. For almost 2 days and nights, U-455 crept through the underwater maze. The crew suffered in the hot, thick air while enemy ships hunted above them. Finally, after 40 hours of terror, they made it through. Against all odds, U-455 had reached the Mediterranean Sea alive, but their luck was about to run out. Once in the Mediterranean, U-455 received new orders. The submarine was told to patrol near the Italian coast and attack Allied supply ships. The Allies were pushing north through Italy, and every convoy of food, fuel, and weapons was important to their advance. For U-455, this meant sailing along Italy's western coast, looking for targets and then hiding after each attack. But by 1944, the Mediterranean was no longer safe for submarines. Allied aircraft dominated the skies, destroyers prowled the waters, and minefields blocked entire areas. The final message from U-455 was routine, just confirming they had received their patrol orders. Nothing in the transmission suggested any problems. The submarine seemed to be operating normally, but after that signal, silence fell. No more reports came from U-455, no requests for help, no acknowledgement of future orders. For German Naval Command, it was as if the submarine had simply vanished into thin air. When weeks turned into months, with no word, the German Navy officially listed U-455 as missing. Families of the crew received cold official letters saying their loved ones had disappeared. The letters offered no details, no explanations, just the terrible news that sons, brothers, and husbands were gone. For the German Navy, it was another submarine lost to the Mediterranean. For the families, it was heartbreak with no closure. Nobody knew what had happened to U-455. Some thought it hit a German mine laid off the Italian coast. Others believed Allied aircraft or ships had spotted and sunk it. A few speculated about mechanical failure or an explosion in the engine room. But, without any wreckage, these were just guesses. For 66 years, the fate of U-455 remained a mystery. Unlike sailors lost on surface ships, where bodies or debris might wash ashore, the men of U-455 had simply disappeared into the deep. Their families never had graves to visit, never had answers to hold on to. Then in 2010, everything changed. Italian diver Roberto Raldi and his team were exploring the seabed near Genoa when they found something that made them stop cold. Rising from the mud 400 feet down was the unmistakable shape of a submarine. The wreck was haunting to look at. The bow pointed upward at a sharp angle, as if the submarine had been frozen while trying desperately to reach the surface. It wasn't, resting flat like many wrecks. Instead, it looked like the crew had fought to save their submarine right until the end, engines straining and ballast tanks emptied in a final bid for life. The hull was covered with 66 years of coral and sea growth, but the steel bones remained intact. At first, the divers couldn't tell which submarine they had found. The sea had erased obvious markers like numbers or insignia, but the submarine's size and design marked it as a German Type 7C. What disturbed the divers most were the hatches. They weren't blown open or damaged in a way that would let the crew escape. Instead, they were sealed shut, twisted by the sea into their closed position. This told a chilling story. The crew was still inside. For Raldi and his team, the realization hit like a cold wave. This wasn't just a wreck. It was a tomb holding the remains of 50 men. Every compartment beneath that encrusted surface wasn't empty space. It was a grave chamber sealed since 1944. The divers contacted historians and naval experts to identify the wreck. Among them were researchers from the Atlantic Wall Museum. By studying wartime patrol routes, missing ship records, and survivor testimonies, they found the answer in German archives. 3 U-boats were unaccounted for in the Mediterranean, and the size and location of this wreck could only be U-455. Exploring the wreck revealed more clues about what had happened. The periscope was still extended and frozen in its up position, meaning the submarine had been near the surface during its final moments. The stern section was badly damaged, showing signs of a massive explosion. But whether the blast came from a mine, a depth charge, or internal failure couldn't be determined. The ocean had revealed some of its secrets while keeping others locked away. For families of the lost crew, the discovery brought mixed emotions. The wreck confirmed what many had suspected: their loved ones had never escaped. But it also gave them a place to mourn and concrete proof that their men were part of history, not just shadows in old records. The wreck itself tells a story through every piece of twisted steel. U-455 rests with its bow pointed upward, as if still trying to reach the surface after all these years. This wasn't the orderly sinking of a surrendered vessel. It was the violent, desperate end of a submarine caught in its final battle. The stern was blown apart by what appeared to be a powerful explosion. Jagged steel tiers suggested an external blast, but internal detonation couldn't be ruled out. The fact that debris wasn't scattered across the seabed suggested the submarine sank as one piece, not breaking up during its descent. The extended periscope painted another picture. U-455 was likely just below the surface, scanning for threats or navigation markers when disaster struck. This suggested the crew had no warning of impending doom. They weren't fleeing in panic or hiding in the depths. They were simply watching and waiting, perhaps seconds from surfacing when fate intervened. The sealed hatches spoke loudest to the divers who couldn't enter them. There had been no attempt to abandon ship, no escape from this doomed vessel. 50 men remained entombed inside, lost to darkness since 1944. To understand the men inside, historians searched naval archives, diaries, and survivor testimonies. The names of the 50 men who boarded U-455 for its final voyage emerged from dusty records. Most never returned, but 2 sailors who were reassigned before the last mission lived to tell their stories. The commander of U-455 was Hans Heinrich Giesler, a career officer known for his calm, steady leadership. Born in 1911, Giesler had served in the Navy long before submarines became weapons of terror. Colleagues described him as quiet but determined, the kind of officer who gave confidence rather than fear to his men. The crew included many young sailors in their late teens and early 20s who knew no adult life except war. They lived in cramped quarters, shared bunks, and worked through endless maintenance routines punctuated by moments of pure terror when enemy ships found them. 2 men escaped U-455's fate through luck alone. Gerhard Schwartz and Helmut Spitzer had served on the submarine, but were reassigned to training duties before its Mediterranean mission. At the time, they probably felt frustrated or even ashamed to be pulled from a combat crew. But that reassignment saved their lives. Years later, Schwartz became a voice for the lost crew. He traveled to Genoa and stood on the shoreline above where U-455 lay, remembering the 50 comrades he had left behind. For him, the wreck wasn't a historical curiosity. It was a grave containing friends who had shared meals, laughter, and fear in those cramped steel quarters. Spitzer remembered the pride the crew felt during their Atlantic victories when U-455 successfully sank enemy cargo ships. But he also recalled the growing fear by 1943 that the war had turned against the U-boats. Everyone knew the hunters were becoming the hunted, he said years later. The discovery of U-455 did more than solve a historical mystery. It forced the world to confront a legacy that had lain hidden for nearly 7 decades. The submarine isn't simply a war relic. It's a tomb preserving the final chapter of 50 men who vanished into silence. For families of the lost sailors, the wreck offered closure but also reopened old wounds. Many relatives had lived entire lives without knowing what happened to their fathers, brothers, or uncles. The German Navy had reported U-455 as missing, but missing isn't the same as dead. Hope and doubt had lingered side by side for decades. The discovery in 2010 ended the uncertainty but made the loss undeniable. The men were still there, entombed beneath the sea beyond any hope of recovery or burial on land. Internationally, the wreck has been recognized as a war grave. By law and custom, sunken submarines are not disturbed. The twisted hatches remain closed, both because of danger and out of respect. Divers who visit treat U-455 as a memorial rather than just an artifact. The submarine has also changed how historians view the U-boat campaign. In wartime propaganda, the Grey Wolves were portrayed as ruthless hunters. But wrecks like U-455 reveal another truth. These men were often young and vulnerable, caught in a war where survival was rare. Theories about what destroyed U-455 continue to shift, adding to its mystery. Was it a German mine laid without warning to submarine crews, an Allied patrol striking in the darkness, or mechanical failure of a submarine pushed beyond its limits? Evidence points in multiple directions without reaching a firm conclusion. 4. Survivors Schwartz and Spitzer, memories of U-455, lasted their entire lives. Their testimony served as a bridge connecting the steel tomb underwater with the world above. Schwartz's journey to Genoa, looking out at waters that had swallowed his comrades, was an act of remembrance for brotherhood forged in steel and silence.